Hi, this is just a short video about cooling. I just recently built a Ryzen 5 3600 computer, and when I was running Cinebench just to test it out, just to assess the performance, I found that the temperature was going over 80 degrees. That's with the stock cooler, which is basically this one. Now, that may well have been within the specified parameters of running less than 95 degrees, but it's still uncomfortably warm for me. And so I looked at this stock cooler and I thought this is not really very good. One of the things, I've separated the fan and the cooler now, but what you can see, in fact, when they're properly mounted, is that there's actually a gap around the outside of the fan. And the design of it means that a lot of the air, or significant amount of the air, is going to be coming out of the cooler having not passed through many of the fins. So you'll get some air that passes more slowly around the hot bit, which is near the core here, but you'll get a lot of air that's simply whizzing past without hardly absorbing any of the heat. So that's probably one of the reasons why it's not very effective. So I ordered this one off eBay. Unfortunately, it doesn't have the same convenient mounting. It's got the sort of traditional clip mounting, but it is copper. I have to say, actually, it's quite a rough base. If you run your finger over it, it's quite rough. But it's got copper heat pipes and lots of fins, so all they're steel, and notice, rather than aluminium. So it should be good. So then. But that was without a fan. That's why it was quite cheap. So my next decision is which fan to use. Well, I've got several. Here I've got an older AMD heatsink, and you can see that's got a great big copper plug in the middle, and that came with this fan. No parameters on it, so I don't know what power it uses. But just spinning it, this produces very little air. So that's probably not going to work. I did consider a couple, because I've got a whole drawer of fans and heat sinks basically. I did consider a couple from some old servers. This is a heat sink and fan from an Opteron, as that's got 4 heat pipes. But in fact, when I looked at it, I realised that the mounting points didn't match up with the AM4 motherboard, so I couldn't use that. But I looked at the fan, because it says that this is suitable for 103 watts. But to my astonishment, this uses 1.43 amps, which is an enormous amount. If you look at it's basically the same diameter as the current AMD one, and that uses 0.2 amps, which means it's much more efficient. Another one I considered was is actually from another HP server. I don't have any specs for this one, but this goes up to 0.6 amps, which is still 3 times the amount. And it doesn't seem to produce noticeably any more air when you just spin it by hand. Another one I considered was this one. Now this monstrosity here, this is actually the cooling fan from an old Alpine power supply unit that blew up. Literally blew up. It went bang. So I salvaged it. 12 centimeters. Now this looks unusual because I have a GTX Titan Black, and it came without the stock cooler. The reason for that was because it was installed in a case where it was relying on passive cooling. So I had to make my own, and this was part of an attempt to make my own. So I used this fan, and this bit here, this kind of funnel, was from an Intel computer that had a funnel going straight from the outside of the case to the motherboard. To the CPU fan, so it took the air directly from the outside. The other thing I've done to it, if I take this off, I had to take this off because there's some things I was doing. You'll see here that I've put plastic liner around the inside of the fan, and the reason for that was because there was what I considered to be excessive clearance. In fact, that's still the case. If we look at this stock AMD fan, for example, you can see there's really quite a big gap. We're talking about 2 millimeters or so around the outside of the fan, between the fan and the shroud, and that's really not necessary. It's easy to make plastic parts molded, more precisely than that. And the thing is, if there's a big gap, it allows air to escape back out. That's why the fans on aeroplane jet turbines, they are really finely machined to minimize that air gap. So I put this around the outside to take up the gap, basically, and that's very fine now. The other thing I did to it, as you can see in here, is I've put these vanes. Now what these vanes do, let me show you a bit closer. What these vanes do, when the fan goes round, it creates not just a straight airflow, but it also twists the air, so you've got half of the velocity is actually rotary. So what these vanes do, these actually straighten the air, and these were made from an old cola bottles. And in fact, when I spin this now just by hand, it produces quite a good flow of air. It produces quite a good flow of air compared to every other fan here. But I'm not actually sure what current that draws. When I was trying to make the GTX Titan Black cooler, it was almost good enough. That was when it was running at about 250 watts. So this fan is almost good enough to cool 250 watts thing when it's being configured like this. This one uses very little power, and so and also this can be controlled. This has got 4 pins, whereas this one's only got 2, and it was really designed to run non-stop. That still didn't stop it blowing up, but there we go. So I've decided to use the stock cooler from the Wraith Stealth, the stock fan from the Wraith Stealth cooler, and use it with this. But what I'm going to do is I'm not just going to stick it on like this, because what I can see, and I see this a lot with fans and things, is huge gaps that will allow some of the air to escape and not go through the heatsink. So I'm going to attach it with a couple of screws, but I'm also going to tape it up and before installing it. Now the other thing I've noticed, and I've had a practice installing this, these things are really fiddly to get right. They're difficult, and it's going to be quite tricky getting this flat without messing up all the heatsink compound, thermal paste rather. So that's going to be a little tricky exercise. Anyway, so let's see how we get on. See, I've had to tilt this up now. Still can't get the fucking thing in. Jesus, these things are difficult. This is why I don't really like this kind of mounting, to be brutally honest. Shit, I'll tell you what can happen with these. This has got a 2-part, and there's a possibility it's come out of the middle bit, which would be a real nuisance. And I think it has. Fuck. Okay, let's hope that has done it. Right, okay, now to test it, see what difference it makes. Okay, so here's what I'm a little bit surprised about. In fact, the temperature is not particularly cool. What if I run Cinebench? Right, that's the alarm because it's gone over 60 degrees. Now this may be a bit hard to see because of the reflections off the screen, and it's very bright in here. But it's gone up to 64. And 65, 75, so 75, 77, basically it's going up to about 80 as it goes chomping through Cinebench, which you can see in the background there. 78. This is really no better than it was before, and I have to say I'm rather surprised and a bit concerned. And I've just checked the temperature of the pipes. They're 80 degrees now, and the fan's at full speed. I just checked the temperature of the pipes and they're not really warm, so that suggests that the heat isn't getting through to them. So it looks as though I have to take the heatsink off and have a look underneath and work out what's going on. Because if the CPU is 81 degrees, then the pipes should be, you know, uncomfortably hot to touch, I would have thought. Not really the effect I was after, to be honest. So something isn't right. Okay, this seems to be the issue. The fact that I put a reasonable amount on, which I think would be adequate for a completely flat base, but this isn't completely flat. That's, I think, part of the issue, and you can see it's kind of gone in the grooves there, and that's why it hasn't spread all over. So clearly I need to put more thermal paste on. So installing this new CPU cooler, this new heatsink with 4 heat pipes, seems to be no better than the stock simple aluminium cooler. And the heat pipes themselves don't seem to be transferring much heat at all. It's almost as if the heat pipes are dry inside, whereas they should have fluid in them, which is necessary for them to work. So I'm going to do some experiments to see how quickly heat should transfer with my Opteron 4 heat pipe cooler and also another cooler, just to do some experiments, because before I take the other one off. But it's not going to plan, basically. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to use this mug and I'm going to test the rate at which heat is transferred on these heat sinks and this one. Okay, that's boiling. Now let me test this basic one, see how long it takes for heat to get to the top. Well, that's coming through pretty quickly. In fact, that's now too hot to touch. So that was pretty quick. Ouch, that's really hot now. Okay, now let's try this one. Yeah. Okay, these are quite warm. Well, the heat has reached the top of these fins already. That's hot. That's getting quite warm. That's getting comfortably hot. These are hot. That's really hot. That's hot. So the heat is going from the bottom, from the water up really quickly. So even though these are steel fins, because of these heat pipes, the heat is going from the bottom to the top pretty damn quickly. That's too hot to touch. I can just about remove that. That was pretty quick. Now let's test this one, which has got a solid copper base. Okay, is heat coming through? I'm thinking it's solid. I presume this is solid anyway. That's getting quite warm. I mean, the whole fins are hot already. They're pretty warm. So, you know, there's heat being dispersed here. And the reason I'm doing it with this way is because only the bottom will be touching the water. Now, to be fair, originally, of course, it'd only be that square, but I can't do that precisely, but the heat is coming through pretty quickly. So there's something really strange going on here, that this thing with this other heatsink with 4 heat pipes, this is from my Opteron, and this is still really, this is still hot. Nothing seems to be happening. So I don't know what's going on. So I think I might have to take that off and check. Okay, what this shows is that I definitely had enough heatsink compound this time. So that isn't the problem. So what on earth is going on?
You okay?
No.
What happened?
It's not working.
Oh.
Right, so I'm now going to put this in hot water. Now, this is what gets me. On this one, I've even made damn sure that all the air from the fan goes properly through the fins, and yet the performance is still no better than this stock aluminium cooler.
Oh.
So that's really surprising me. So I'm just going to put this in here and see how long it takes for heat to get through these pipes. Well, that's interesting. That's getting hot straight away. That's really hot. That's weird. Damn. So when I put this on hot water, the heat comes through these copper pipes, and now they're definitely too hot to touch straight away. Yet when they're on the CPU with plenty of thermal paste, and it's good thermal paste, AK450 is fairly respectable, the pipes are cold. I can touch them easily without, they don't even feel warm, they feel like ambient temperature. So it's almost as if the lid of the CPU is not properly connected. So this is really strange. So the problem then appears not to be this cooler, and it might not even be this cooler. It might be the CPU. That's very strange. Okay, now I was thinking about this, and a thought occurred to me. I wonder if perhaps the sintered lining of the heat pipes had come off or something, or the fluid had escaped. Or it wouldn't be the fluid, but if the sintered lining had come off, then it wouldn't suck the fluid back to the base, and that would make a difference to whether it was operating vertically or on its side. So I tried doing an experiment on its side with a separate heat source. That didn't really work. So what I tried doing, I put it back. I put the Ryzen 7 cooler, what's it called? I've forgotten the name of it now, but anyway, Spire or something. I put that back, and I'm getting better at putting those stupid clip things in. Fresh paste, and so I thought I'll run the computer on its side this time, because that will eliminate, because then gravity will bring the fluid back to the base, and because I know it had worked in a vertical position when I put it on top of a hot hot cup of water, but it didn't really make any difference, and the heat pipes were still what I'd call, they're getting a little bit warm, but they wasn't uncomfortable to touch in the slightest. So it seemed to me that the heat was having difficulty getting through to the cooler. Now it might have been because the base was really rough, possibly. So I went to CCL's website, and quite surprised to find someone there actually on a Sunday. So I was quite impressed with that, and had an online chat with them. And they sent me to a link that compared the performance of the 3 AMD current heat sinks with each other on a Ryzen 5 2600. And you know, when you see the temperatures on, say, something like 100% blender load test, which is creeping up to 60 degrees on a 2600, okay, you can see why on a 3600 it might be getting up to 80 on the Stealth cooler. But in those tests, the bigger one with they did produce better performance. So it's a bit of a mystery why it wasn't producing better performance in this CPU. I know how to put how to install cooler because I've been doing it, you know, for a long time. So in the end, I decided to, well, what you pointed out was, well, AMD coolers aren't bad, but there are better options. So I've ordered another 4 copper pipe cooler off eBay, not an expensive one. But what I've decided to do in the meantime is, instead of using the fan that came with the Stealth cooler, I'm going to attach this one, because this one definitely produces more airflow, and this might make a difference finally. So we'll see. Okay, so now I've attached this fan, and I've done it using just tape, but this is Gorilla duct tape, so it should be quite good. And we'll see how it performs. In fact, I can just if I just remove this little stand here. Yeah, I know it's a bit of a rat's nest. Right, that's how I've sort of done it. These are great, these little cameras, because you can get them in everywhere. Right, let's see. Okay, let's see how it goes. I prefer running it outright because I think the hard drives prefer to be upright. But even with this 120mm fan running at maximum speed, that's still pretty quiet actually. And I can feel there's a much stronger draft coming through these veins here. Although actually I'm noticing the speed is being controlled. Interestingly, the speed's definitely varying. It's only got 2 wires, so it looks as though it's worked out how to control it. So, interesting. So, as we look at this now, we can see that, I mean, I've changed the profile because what I found is that the fan was cycling noticeably quite a lot. So I can hear it. It is a bit noisier than the Wraith one, but then it does pump a lot more air. And it was kind of slightly distracting to hear the fan speeding up and slowing down. Of course, I'm running with the case completely open at the moment. But even so, I've basically changed it so that it will run at max speed unless it gets really, really cool. But notice in fact the temperature, which you might be able to see, I don't know, because the light here is quite high. It's running definitely lower, mostly at idle, than it was yesterday. Although it was slightly cooler in here, but it's running on average about 4 or 5 degrees less. So now let's run Cinebench to see how it does. Oops, meant to get this better. You can see it munching through all the tasks there, and in fact it's about 13 times faster than my Athlon 3850, which is on an AM1 motherboard. Okay, so it's gone over 70 degrees, so the BIOS alarm's gone off. But at the moment, it's still sticking around 70 degrees, 71, okay. Well, that is significantly, okay, 72. That's still about 10 degrees lower than its peak yesterday, although the room was about 4 degrees warmer. So I'm going to leave it running with this. Hello, you keep thing. I'm going to leave it running with this failed power supply fan on this AMD cooler. I'm still puzzled as to why the performance was so poor relatively in comparison with what you might expect compared to the basic aluminium one, the Stealth one. I don't really have an answer, except maybe it's the fact that the surface, the base of it was so rough, didn't seem particularly level. Maybe, poor thermal contact for that reason. Maybe there's some problem with the capillary action inside the cooler. Maybe it's not working the way it should. I don't know. If you've got any thoughts on that, maybe you'll explain in the comments. Because according to a review, it should have been better. It shouldn't have been exactly the same. So that's a bit strange. But anyway, for any further improvements, at least it's not melting anyway. That's the main thing. And for any further improvements, I'll have to wait until the new cooler arrives.